In this episode, we debunk Jim Rohn. Get excited, because this is Tiny Leaps, Big Change. You've probably heard of Jim Rohn. If you've been following personal development for pretty much any length of time, you've seen videos from him. You've probably heard people mention his name as someone you should be listening to, someone you should be watching. And that's no surprise. He is incredibly popular, and it makes sense that he's popular. When you watch his videos, when you listen to his content, you feel empowered. You feel ready to tackle the world. You feel like you're good to go, that you are in control. People like this, the Jim Rohns, Tony Robbins of the world, they focus their efforts on getting you short-term excited, short-term motivated. They want you to feel like after you've watched this video, you can go do anything. After you've read this book, you can go do anything. After you've bought this course, you can go do anything. They sell motivation in a bottle. While this by itself is not inherently a bad thing, I mean, if you get motivation in that way and it helps you to do something with your life, then that's really not a bad thing. The problem is when you live in that world, when you are creating content that is inherently surface level, because its job is just to connect with the broadest group of people available and motivate them in that moment. All you can do is say things that sound nice, but don't really mean anything. Say things that make great Instagram quotes, but don't really have any actionable value to them. This is the problem with people like Jim Rohn and people like Tony Robbins. And what I want to talk about today is one specific quote from Jim Rohn, something that I think maybe is meant with good intentions, maybe is meant with the goal of helping you feel alive and excited and like you're ready to move and do something. However, ultimately, I think leads to a bad place, leads you to the same cycle of failure and starting over and failure and starting over. So when we get back, we're going to dive into that. Stay tuned. So the quote that I want to talk about in today's episode is one you may have heard or maybe seen on Instagram. And it's the idea that you shouldn't wish it were easier. Instead, you should wish you were better. So I think the exact quote, and again, this is attributed to Jim Rohn. I believe he's the one who said it. I've heard him say it. I don't know if he was the first person to come up with it, but that's who I'm going to be addressing it to for the purposes of this episode. I believe the exact quote is, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." Now, he says this typically from a stage to an audience who have likely paid some amount of money to be there, and it sounds really good. In that moment, when you are showing up to the event, when you are putting in the time, putting in the money, putting in the work, you are that person. You are trying and working hard to make it happen. In that moment, when this person who promises you they can help you change your life says, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better," and the crowd erupts, how do you think you're going to feel? You're going to feel amazing. You're going to feel like you can do anything. You're going to feel like the answer to all of your problems really just comes down to, I need to work harder. I need to put in the time and make it happen for myself. Because life is hard for everybody, but I just need to be better than it. I just need to be better than everyone around me. When you're in that moment and you're in that crowd, and you listen to that and you hear that message, you feel excited. But what happens when you go home? What happens when the next tough thing shows up in your life? Well, usually what happens is we fail. We get demotivated. We start to feel like maybe we're not good enough. Because Jim Rohn said that I just needed to be better and I wasn't able to do it. So I must not be better. I must not be capable. I must not be good enough. Now, this is a really personal issue for me lately because this has been the core of my issues. This has been the core of the things that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis. It's feeling like I must not be good enough. Because all of the messaging out there says that if you work hard and you put in the time and you put in the effort, then it'll work out for you. And if it doesn't, it's because you weren't good enough. Now, I've talked a lot on this show about how the broken systems that we exist in have far more to do with the outcomes that we get in our lives than our own effort will ever have. I've talked about that, and that should not be new to you. What I want to talk about in this episode is how one piece of that, these like motivational quotes that really mean nothing, this idea of not wishing it were easier, wishing it were better, is actually fundamentally flawed. Because just looking at that one quote, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better, that actually goes against all of what science says is the best way to drive consistency in behavior. If we want to keep showing up, if we want to keep doing things, whether that's building a habit or getting to the gym or studying at nights or whatever our thing is, if we want to keep doing that, all of the science in the world, all of the behavioral science, all of the psychology, all of the behavioral economics, every single researcher is pretty much in agreement. I don't know if agreement, I don't know what the word is. Every single researcher agrees that the way you do that is to remove obstacles. It's to remove roadblocks. It's to make it easier. Whatever that behavior that you want to follow through with, the goal should be make it easier to do. Whether that is through building systems. I spoke with somebody on Twitter today about this exact concept. Roberto Blake, he's a great YouTuber. I'm going to link to him in the description of this episode. He shared how his systems for creating content are the reason that he now has over 100,000, I think maybe going on 200,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Now, did he work hard? Absolutely. He worked incredibly hard, but what allowed him to keep working hard? What allowed him to make real progress while working hard were the systems that he built along the way. He made it easier to work hard. He made it easier to keep showing up. When we look at these quotes and we say, don't make it easier, be better. When we look at that, what we're doing is actually the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be looking for ways to make our lives easier. We should be searching for opportunities to reduce friction. Because at the end of the day, life is way too damn complex to sit here and worry about being the best you can possibly be at everything. Every possible thing out there. It's absurd. It's way too much to ask of any individual person, and we shouldn't be asking it. What we should be doing is finding ways as a community and finding ways as individuals to make life easier, to make our goals easier, to make pursuit of the things we actually care about easier. That doesn't necessarily mean we're doing handouts or whatever scare tactic people on the right want to use nowadays. That's really not what this is about. What this is about is, why do we just accept that life should be hard? Why do we sit here and say, oh yeah, life is hard. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's stupid. Life could be easy. We could choose to make it easy. But instead we're choosing to make it hard because some old white dude got on a stage and said, don't make it easier, be better. That's just dumb. My point in this episode is to highlight this one very specific quote. However, I want to make sure this is clear. This happens all across the personal development industry. This happens all across the success industry, the motivation industry. Pull up your phone right now, go on Instagram and type inspiration, and you'll see a laundry list of quotes just like this, that when you sit and think about it for just 1 minute, just a minute, you realize this might actually not be that good of advice. Sure, maybe I feel motivated in the moment and excited, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when this messaging persists and we start to adopt it as our viewpoint, when we start to look at this as this is how things should be. When we start to believe and internalize that life is not supposed to be easy, that we are supposed to work hard, we're supposed to try to be better. When we start to internalize that, the people who ultimately are in charge and the people who ultimately are responsible for the very bad systems that make our lives difficult, they win and they walk away laughing to the bank. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the only one who doesn't want them to win. Maybe I'm the only one who recognizes that life doesn't actually have to be that hard. That if we work together and we do what we need to do and we elect the people that we need to elect and we vote the way that we should be voting and we do all of the things and we help each other and we support each other, that if we do that and we look for ways to make life easier for everyone, we might actually enjoy this hellscape that we've all been born into by no fault of our own. We're all here without choosing to be here, so why not just make it enjoyable? And at the very least, maybe we should just stop taking bad advice. So that's all I got for this episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to me rant a little bit. It was a little bit of a rant, but this wasn't an angry rant. You know, this wasn't like the personal development is bullshit episode. This was very specifically, be careful what you are consuming, because not everything actually makes any sense when you dig into it. However, it can plant a seed that leads to you thinking about the world in a way that is not actually beneficial for you. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Thank you for being here. Find me on YouTube if you haven't already. Link to that is in the description of this episode. I've got a question for you. Who is your favorite motivational speaker? Like a Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Brene Brown type of person. Like, who is your favorite? Don't worry, I'm not going to tear them all apart. There actually are some that I really like. But yeah, I just want to hear what you have to say. Leave that down in the comments below. And remember that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day.